The neon lights of Station Omega cast harsh shadows across Raven Cross's face as she counted her last credits. 15. Barely enough for a synthetic coffee, let alone the fuel she needed to get off this backwater hub. She slouched deeper into the worn cushions of the Stellar Drift, the station's seediest bar, watching patrons from 17 different species pretend they weren't watching her. 6 years of successful smuggling runs, and one bad job had left her stranded. The syndicate didn't take kindly to failed deliveries, even when said failure involved choosing not to transport sentient beings. Raven had principles, damn it, even if they'd cost her everything. Your table appears understaffed. The voice carried the musical lilt common to the Astari race, but something about it felt older, deeper. Raven looked up to find the tallest Astari she'd ever seen. His skin held the typical crystalline sheen of his species, but instead of their usual blue or green tones, his sparkled with an impossible array of colors, like light through a prism. Not taking company tonight, Raven muttered, but the stranger was already sliding into the booth across from her. Nixis, he said, producing a deck of cards that seemed to shimmer in the bar's dim light. And I believe you'll want to make an exception. Raven's instincts screamed danger, but her empty fuel tanks screamed louder. You're not like other Astari. Perceptive. Nixis's lips curved into what might have been a smile. I am what you might call, an interested party. One who knows of your recent ethical stand against the syndicate. Raven's hand moved to her blaster. If you're here to collect. I am here to offer opportunity. The cards moved through his fingers like liquid starlight. A game. Simple stakes. You win, I provide you with a new ship, fully fueled, and enough credits to start fresh. And if I lose? Nixis's eyes sparkled with ancient amusement. You work for me. 1 standard year. Raven should have walked away. But something in those impossible eyes held her. What's the game? An old favorite from Earth. Poker. His fingers never stopped moving the cards. 3 hands. Best of 3 wins. You're not human. How do you know poker? I know many things, Raven Cross. Including why you really refused that syndicate job. His voice dropped lower. Those children you freed. They reached their families safely. Raven's breath caught. She'd been wondering, trying not to wonder, hoping. Deal the cards. The first hand went to Nixis, his 4 kings beating her full house. The second went to Raven, her straight flush causing the first flicker of surprise she'd seen on his crystalline features. As he dealt the final hand, the bars seemed to fade away, until there was nothing but the cards, his prismatic skin, and the weight of destiny in the recycled station air. Raven stared at her cards. 2 pair, queens and tens. Decent, but not spectacular. Across the table, Nixis's expression was unreadable as starlight through fog. Perhaps, he said softly, we should raise the stakes. I've got nothing left to bet. But I do. His eyes seemed to hold entire galaxies now. Instead of 1 year's service, I offer you partnership. Equal share in my enterprises, access to resources beyond your imagining, and answers to questions you haven't thought to ask. In exchange for a binding contract. Your skills, your principles, your unwavering loyalty, and your humanity. Raven's cards trembled slightly. My humanity? There are forces at work in this galaxy, Raven Cross. Ancient powers seeking to tip the balance. They believe humanity too young, too volatile, too unpredictable to have a voice in what's coming. I believe differently. He laid his cards face down. Do you accept the modified stakes? She should have asked more questions. Should have demanded explanations. Instead, she heard herself say, I call. Nixis revealed his hand. 3 kings. Strong, but not unbeatable. With shaking fingers, Raven laid down her cards. 2 queens. 2 tens. And the Ace of Stars, a card that hadn't existed moments before, its surface swirling with real cosmic energy. Nixus's laugh held the joy of supernovas. Well played, my dear. Well played indeed. I don't understand. Did I win? You won exactly what you needed to win. He stood, offering her a hand that sparkled with the light of distant suns. Come. We have much to discuss, and the fate of multiple species to arrange. As Raven took his hand, she felt the first stirrings of change beneath her skin, like stardust coming alive in her veins. Whatever she'd just gotten herself into, she had a feeling the galaxy would never be the same. Neither would she. The crystalline spires of Nixus's ship, the prismatic oath, put every luxury vessel Raven had ever seen to shame. Its corridors seemed to breathe with living light, and every surface hummed with technology far beyond human understanding. But it was the view from the observation deck that truly stole her breath. Those aren't normal stars, Raven said, watching patterns of light dance between distant suns. Her skin tingled with that same stardust sensation she'd felt since their card game, growing stronger by the hour. The cosmic weave, Nixus explained, his crystalline form reflecting the strange lights. What your scientists call dark matter, but it's far more complex. It's the foundation of all binding contracts in the galaxy. Like our partnership? Raven traced patterns on the transparent barrier, noticing how the light seemed to follow her fingers. Her reflection showed subtle changes, tiny crystals beginning to form along her hairline, her eyes holding hints of that same prismatic quality as Nixus's. Precisely. Though our arrangement is unprecedented. He moved closer, studying her transformation. No human has ever held a seat on the Stellar Council. They believe your kind too impulsive, too emotional for cosmic governance. And you disagree? I believe those very qualities make you perfect for what's coming. His expression darkened. The weave is unraveling, Raven. Ancient contracts that have held the galaxy in balance for millennia are failing. The Council believes strict control is the answer. More regulations, more restrictions, more power concentrated in fewer hands. Raven watched a patrol of Council ships pass in the distance, their hulls marked with symbols of authority. But you think they're wrong. The weave responds to emotion as much as logic. To force as much as structure. Humanity's capacity for both could be exactly what we need. He produced a small crystal that pulsed with inner light. Which is why the Council has ordered your immediate termination. Raven's hand went to her blaster, but Nixus's laugh stopped her. Not by me, dear partner. I am many things, but never an assassin. No, this warning comes from another friend of humanity's potential. The crystal projected an image of another Astari, her form more traditionally blue-tinted. Brother, she addressed Nixus, they know what you've done. The game was witnessed. They're calling it treason against the natural order. You must take her to the Nexus before. The message cut off as alarms blared through the ship. Through the observation window, Raven watched 3 Council dreadnoughts materialize from the weave itself. Speaking of impulsive decisions, Nixus mused, seemingly unconcerned as energy weapons powered up, how do you feel about breaking a few cosmic laws? You mean besides the ones we've already broken? Raven felt that stardust energy surge through her veins, responding to her rising adrenaline. What did you have in mind? Instead of answering, Nixus pressed his hand to a control panel. The prismatic oath's engines hummed to life, but it wasn't the usual sound of standard drives. This was more like music. The Council believes they control all paths through the weave, Nixus said as the ship's interior began to glow. But there are older ways. Wild ways. Routes that respond not to authority, but to harmony. He held out his hand. Shall we show them what a human's intuition can add to an Astari's experience? Raven took his hand without hesitation, gasping as energy flowed between them. She could feel the ship now, feel the weave, feel the music of space itself. The council ships opened fire, but their weapons seemed to move in slow motion as Raven and Nixis moved as one. The prismatic oath didn't so much fly as dance. They wove between energy blasts in a spiral pattern that felt like a waltz. Each evasive maneuver created ripples in the weave, turning their escape into art. Raven laughed as they spun through space, understanding now why Nixis had chosen her. This wasn't just about humanity's potential, it was about joy, about finding beauty in the chaos. They burst through a final layer of spacetime, emerging into a sector Raven had never seen on any map. At its center floated what looked like a city made of pure light, its architecture defying physics and reason alike. "The Nexus," Nixis said softly. "The first and greatest creation of the weave. And, if we survive the next few hours, humanity's best hope for a voice in galactic affairs." He turned to her, his expression more serious than she'd yet seen. "Are you ready to help me rewrite the laws of reality?" Raven looked down at her hands, now definitely showing crystalline facets, then back at the impossible city of light. "One condition." "Name it." "When this is over, we're having a rematch. And this time, you don't get to use cards that don't exist." His laughter echoed through the ship as they began their approach to the Nexus, the Council's forces regrouping behind them, and the fate of two species hanging in the balance of their strange partnership. The real game was just beginning. The Nexus defied every law of physics Raven had ever learned. Buildings shifted like liquid crystal, streets rearranged themselves as they walked, and everywhere, threads of the weave pulsed with raw power. But it was the inhabitants that truly caught her attention, beings of pure energy, their forms barely contained by ancient contract bonds. "The first ones," Nixis explained as they made their way through the impossible city. "Those who discovered the weave and built the original contracts that shape our reality. They don't look happy to see us." Indeed, the energy beings recoiled as they passed, their forms flickering with what seemed like fear or disgust. "They're seeing something unprecedented." Nixis gestured to Raven's reflection in a crystalline wall. Her transformation had accelerated, her skin now held a subtle iridescence, and her eyes swirled with the same cosmic energy as the weave itself. A human absorbing weave energy should be impossible. The contracts that govern species evolution specifically forbid it. Then how? Because those contracts were written without accounting for human adaptability. Or perhaps. He paused as they reached what appeared to be a vast library, its shelves holding not books but swirling vortexes of pure information. Perhaps this was always meant to happen. A figure materialized before them, taller than the other first ones, its energy form somehow older, deeper. "The breaker of bonds," it addressed Nixis, its voice resonating directly in Raven's mind. "You dare bring this abomination to our sanctuary? Careful, Ancient One." Nixis's usual playful tone held an edge of steel. "You're speaking to my contracted partner. A contract that violates the fundamental laws." Energy crackled around them as more First Ones appeared. "The human species was contained for a reason, Breaker. Their chaos cannot be allowed to infect the weave." Raven felt the stardust in her veins responding to their anger, power building under her skin. "Contained? What does that mean?" "It means, my dear," Nixis said quietly, "that humanity's relatively slow development wasn't entirely natural. The Council has been subtly suppressing your species' evolution for millennia." The revelation hit Raven like a physical blow. All those stories about ancient astronauts, hidden potential, supernatural abilities. Traces of your true nature bleeding through the suppression contracts. Nixis produced a crystal similar to the one that had held his sister's warning. Humanity was meant to be so much more. The First One saw your potential and feared it. Fear became law, law became reality, and reality. He smiled. "Reality is what we're here to change." The lead First One surged forward. "The contracts cannot be broken. The chaos cannot be unleashed." But Raven wasn't listening. She was feeling the weave around them, feeling the contracts that bound it, feeling the artificial limitations placed on her entire species. And she was getting angry. The stardust in her blood ignited. Energy coursed through her, responding to her emotions in a way the first ones clearly hadn't expected. The crystal walls of the Nexus resonated with her power, and suddenly she could see the contracts themselves, complex lattices of energy and mathematics and pure will. Impossible. The first one's form flickered. The binding should prevent. Should, Nixis said with obvious satisfaction. Such a dangerous word. Like never and forever and absolute. He held out his hand to Raven. Shall we show them why I chose a smuggler as humanity's representative? Raven grasped his hand, their combined power sending shockwaves through the weave. Because who better to break into reality itself? They moved as one, their merged energy reaching into the very fabric of spacetime. Raven's smuggler's instincts found the weak points in the contracts while Nixis's ancient knowledge showed her how to exploit them. Together, they began unraveling thousands of years of artificial constraints. The first ones tried to stop them, but their rigid adherence to their own laws made them predictable. Raven and Nixis danced through their attacks like they had through the councils, each move strengthening their connection to each other and to the weave itself. But power had its price. With each contract they broke, Raven felt herself changing more. The crystal formation spread across her skin, her atoms reorganizing themselves into something neither human nor Astari. She could feel Nixis changing too, his perfectly ordered crystal structure taking on more chaotic, human aspects. Raven. His voice cut through the power surge. We have to stop. The transformation. No. She gripped his hand tighter. Humanity deserves to know the truth. We deserve our birthright. Even if it costs your humanity. She met his eyes, seeing genuine concern beneath his usual confident facade. You didn't choose me because I was human. You chose me because I was willing to become something more. Around them, the Nexus shuddered as more contracts shattered. The first ones wailed as their carefully constructed reality began to reform itself. And in the space between moments, between heartbeats, between what was and what could be, Raven felt the last traces of her old self dissolving into stardust. She had never felt more alive. But as the power reached its peak, a new sound cut through the chaos, council warships, hundreds of them, emerging from the weave. And leading them was a familiar crystalline form, Nixis's sister, her expression heavy with sorrow. I'm sorry, brother, her voice echoed through the Nexus. But some laws cannot be broken without breaking everything. The siege of the Nexus was about to begin. The Council fleet darkened the skies above the Nexus, their ships forming intricate patterns that strengthened their connection to the weave. At their center, Nixis's sister Lyra's vessel pulsed with ancient power. The Council believes they're protecting order, Nixis said, watching the fleet through the Nexus's crystalline walls. They don't understand that true order requires chaos to evolve. Raven barely heard him, too fascinated by her reflection. Her transformation had stabilized into something extraordinary, her skin held the crystalline properties of the Astari but shifted like quicksilver, while her eyes blazed with pure weave energy. Is this what you planned all along? I planned to shake the foundations of reality. He touched her face gently, his own form now showing distinctly human characteristics. I didn't plan to care quite so much about my partner in crime. Before she could respond, Lyra's voice echoed through the Nexus. Brother, your experiment has gone far enough. The human's transformation proves what we've always feared, their species cannot be trusted with cosmic power. Look who's talking about trust, Raven called back. Your council's been hobbling humanity since we first looked at the stars and dreamed. To protect the galaxy from your chaos. To protect your control, Nixis corrected. But control and order are not the same thing, sister. You of all people should understand that. A pause, then, you have 1 hour to surrender the human and face judgment. After that, we burn the Nexus to ash. The first ones, who had been watching the exchange with growing agitation, suddenly surged forward. "You cannot," their leader thundered. "The Nexus is sacred." "The Nexus is compromised," Lyra replied. "The human's presence has already corrupted its primary contracts. Better to destroy it than let chaos spread." Raven felt the weave responding to the first one's distress, its energy patterns becoming erratic. Then she noticed something odd: where the patterns intersected with her new form, they didn't break down. They evolved. "Nixis," she whispered. "I don't think chaos is the enemy of order. I think it's its partner." He watched as she reached out to touch a nearby energy stream. Instead of disrupting it, her contact caused it to spiral into new, more complex patterns. Fascinating. The weave doesn't just respond to your humanity, it's learning from it. Exactly. The Council thinks chaos and order are opponents, but they're wrong. Excitement made her skin shimmer brighter. They're two parts of the same whole. Like a card game, Nixis finished, his eyes lighting up. Rigid rules creating infinite possibilities. Or like us. She took his hand, feeling their combined energy pulse. A starry precision and human improvisation. Above them, the Council fleet began powering up their weapons. But Raven was no longer afraid. She understood now why Nixis had chosen her, why the transformation felt so right. She wasn't becoming less human, she was becoming what humans were always meant to be. "The contracts don't need to be broken," she said, watching energy flow between their joined hands. "They need to be expanded." Nixis laughed with genuine delight. "My clever smuggler. Always finding new ways through old barriers." They turned to the first ones, who had been watching their exchange with growing comprehension. "Your original contracts weren't wrong," Raven told them. "They were incomplete. You tried to write the chaos out of reality, but chaos is what allows reality to grow. The Council will never accept this," the first one's leader warned, but there was uncertainty in its voice. "The Council," Nixis said, "is about to learn what happens when order and chaos work together." Raven closed her eyes, feeling the weave's energy flow through her transformed body. She could sense every contract in the Nexus, could see how they fit together, and more importantly, how they could fit together better. "Ready to rewrite the laws of reality?" she asked Nixis. "With you, my dear." "Always." They reached out together, their combined power flowing into the weave. But instead of breaking contracts, they began reshaping them, weaving chaos and order into a new kind of harmony. The Nexus responded, its structure shifting to accommodate the changes, becoming something both more ordered and more free. Above them, the Council fleet opened fire. But their weapons met a barrier they'd never encountered before, one that didn't just resist chaos, but embraced and redirected it. Their energy beams spiraled into new patterns, becoming part of the very defense they meant to break. "Impossible." Lyra's voice shook. "The contracts are evolving," Nixis called to his sister. "As all things must. The question is, will you evolve with them?" The first ones began to glow, their energy forms resonating with the new patterns. "We understand," their leader said slowly. "The flaw was not in chaos itself, but in our fear of it." Raven felt the change spreading through the weave, touching every corner of known space. Humanity's suppressed potential began to unlock, not in a dangerous surge but in a controlled awakening. And everywhere, order and chaos began their eternal dance. But as the power flowed through her, Raven felt something else, a price still to be paid, a choice still to be made. She looked at Nixis and saw in his eyes that he felt it too. Their final test was about to begin. The choice crystallized in the space between moments. They could feel it in the weave, in their transformed bodies, in the very fabric of reality itself. The new harmony they'd created was stable, but incomplete. It needed anchors, living bridges between order and chaos. It was never about changing the contracts, Raven realized, watching the energy patterns swirl around them. It was about becoming the contract. Nixus nodded, his partly humanized form resonating with the same understanding. The weave needs guardians who understand both sides. Not just order, not just chaos, but the dance between them. Above them, the council fleet hung motionless, their weapons silent as the changes rippled through reality. Lyra's ship descended to the Nexus, landing in a courtyard that shifted to accommodate it. When she emerged, her crystalline form showed signs of the same transformation affecting everyone connected to the weave. "The old laws are changing," she said, her voice holding wonder rather than fear. "I can feel them, evolving." "As they were always meant to," Nixus replied. "But evolution requires guidance." He turned to Raven. "Are you ready for your next hand, partner?" Raven looked down at her transformed self, no longer fully human, not quite Astari, but something gloriously new. "What's the stake this time?" "Everything." His eyes held galaxies. "The weave needs anchors throughout reality. Beings who can maintain the balance between chaos and order. Who better than those who've already crossed that bridge?" The first ones materialized around them, their energy forms now showing traces of solid matter. "The humans are awakening," their leader announced. "All across the galaxy, they're discovering their true potential. They will need teachers. And the Astari are learning to embrace change," Lyra added. "They will need guides." Raven felt the power of the weave coursing through her, stronger than ever. "So we become living contracts. The bridges between species, between order and chaos. We become what both sides need," Nixus said softly. "But the choice must be freely made. No tricks, no cosmic card games this time." Raven laughed. "You still owe me that rematch. We'll have eternity for games, my dear. If you accept." She looked around at the Nexus, at the fleet above, at the galaxy stretching out before them with all its infinite possibilities. She thought about humanity awakening to its true potential, about the Astari learning to dance with chaos, about the endless adventure of keeping it all in balance. "One condition," she said. "Name it. We do this together. Partners, for real this time. No more secret agendas. I wouldn't have it any other way." He held out his hand, and she took it without hesitation. The weave responded to their choice, power surging through them both. But this time it wasn't about transformation, it was about completion. Their merged energy spread through the Nexus, creating new patterns that would serve as templates for future guardians. The first ones began to fade, their purpose finally fulfilled. "The age of rigid contracts is over," they announced. "The age of living harmony begins." Lyra stepped forward, her own form starting to shift. "The Council will adapt. We'll need training ourselves, brother." "Oh, I think humanity's newest representatives will be excellent teachers," Nixus said, grinning at Raven. "Especially the ones with experience bending rules." The power settled into its new configuration, and Raven felt the weight of their new role, not as a burden, but as a promise. They would be guardians, teachers, bridges between worlds. They would watch humanity flower into its birthright and help the Astari learn to dance with chaos. And somewhere in the vast tapestry of spacetime, an impossible deck of cards disappeared from a grimy bar, its purpose finally fulfilled. "So," Raven said, as reality reshaped itself around their new existence, "about that rematch." Nixus laughed, the sound echoing through the weave like music. "My dear, the game is just beginning." And in the endless dance of order and chaos, a smuggler who dared to change and a trickster who learned to trust began their eternal partnership, dealing hope and harmony to a galaxy finally ready to embrace both sides of its nature. After all, the best contracts aren't written in stone or starlight. They're written in stardust and choice, in trust and transformation, in the endless possibility of two people who chose to become something more, together.